This episode is copyrighted by Grace Sammon and Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Thank you for visiting with us on Launchpad.
This is Launchpad. Welcome to episode 35. We're so excited today to join M. Lee Musgrave, Saborna, Roychowdhury, Fred Rutman, and Kirsten G. Schuder. We'll be joining hopefully by Fred in just a little bit, but meanwhile, on behalf of Mary Helen Sheriff, the author marketing coach, and myself, we are so glad that you've joined us here on Launchpad. Today we have these just wonderful Black Rose writing authors. Today we'll delight in a contemporary romance thriller, a coming-of-age novel set in India, a memoir of the repeatedly dead, and a novel where an unexplained phenomena might just save all humankind from destruction. I'm so happy to have these three authors join us. We have guests joining us here live on the Bookish Road Trip. If you are here, please feel free to make comments, ask our authors questions. We love having each of our guests with us. So let's just jump right in with Lee Musgrave and tell us about Off Kilter.
Off Kilter is the second series in the James Terror Mystery series. It eventually will have a third book, so it'll be a trilogy. And it is set in contemporary Los Angeles in the art community there. And it's a murder mystery that features James Terror, who is an amateur sleuth and also an artist, and also he hosts the PBS program called Cal Arts.
Fascinating. Well, we're going to want to hear more about that as we move forward. Saborna Roychowdhury, you have written a coming-of-age novel, Everything Here Belongs to You. Tell us about it.
Yes, so it is a story of, love, betrayal, and redemption. It's literary fiction, and it is set in India in a city called Kolkata. And the story takes place in a house in a, middle class Bengali family where Parul and Mohini, two girls, grow up. Okay, but Parul is a maid, and Mohini is the employer's daughter. So, Mohini's father is a famous weightlifter. Mohini's life is secure. She has a big house, bank balance. She's going to go to college. But Parul is a maid, and she lives a very insecure, dark future. She has a very dark future. She doesn't know where her life is going. And every month, Parul's father comes from the village and collects all her wages and takes it with him. So Parul is very frustrated, and even though she's very, very close to Mohini and they grow up like sisters, Parul knows that that her life is very different and she's not going anywhere. So in this very frustrated state, one day she meets Rahim, who happens to be a political militant, and she asks Rahim to teach her the Islamic way because Parul is actually Muslim. And but Rahim, because he has very radical ideas, kind of brainwashes her and wants her to do certain things that she definitely would not have done. So meanwhile, an American teenager comes to this house to learn yoga and meditation, and Rahim asks the maid to harm him, and the maid has to make a very, very difficult choice what she's going to do. Is she going to be loyal to the family that has given her a home and she has lived there all her life, or is she going to betray their family and follow Rahim's orders?
So we'll have to hear more about that and the suspense that comes with it. We haven't had Fred Rutman join us yet, but Fred has written a novel. It's a memoir called The Summer I Died 20 Times. And Fred is frequently known as Repeatedly Dead Fred. So his memoir we will learn more about as we move through today, and hopefully he will be able to join us. Kirsten G. Schuder has written a fiction, Inside Dweller, Genesis. Kirsten, tell us about it.
Okay. Well, here's the cover.
Beautiful.
I love we have like an art cover genius at the publishing company. And well, the book is about a woman who experiences a string of strange phenomenon. And she does what anyone else does. She writes it off as, just she comes up with simple explanations for it because that's what we all do. Until uh, she saw an entity that she thought she hallucinated in the hospital. It winds up in her home and it attacks her. So she can no longer ignore the fact that something's going on. But when she wakes up, there's no physical evidence of the attack. So then she embarks on a journey to figure out what is going on with her. And she obtains the help of a specialist who will help her recover her memories. And their journey kicks off, and she must find out what's going on to save herself and everyone that she loves.
And potentially the world, all of humankind.
That's right.
That is a tall order. I find each of your books are very, very different, but you all have wound up at Black Rose Writing. And Kirsten's already given a shout out to the cover artist. How did you find your way to that particular press? Let's start with you, Lee.
Um, that's a good question. Really, what I decided to do was I didn't want to spend any time trying to get an agent and then have the agent try and find me a publisher. I felt like if I did that, probably a whole year would go by. And I didn't feel like I wanted to do that. So I just went online and looked up publishers who were willing to accept um, applications without an agent. And Black Rose Writing was one of them. And since it was based in Texas, and I lived for a little while in Texas when I was growing up as a teenager, I felt sort of connected somehow, and I decided to send the manuscript directly to them.
And Saborna, what about yourself? And then Kirsten.
Um, well, I actually in 2015 I met my literary agent. Her name is Julie Stevenson, and she works for MMQL Lit. And Julie loved my book, and um, she made me edit the book quite a bit. So that editing took at least 4 years. Because the POV was wrong, the structure of the book was wrong, everything had to be changed, and I had to get another editor to come and help me. And her name is she works for St. Martin's Press. And she gave me a lot of direction, and I changed the book, and the book was ready and polished and beautiful and ready to go. And then COVID started. Okay. And Julie took it to the market when the COVID was at its height and nobody was responding. So, I felt like everybody has left New York, and there was, complete silence, when my book started to go out to all these publishing companies. No one was responding. And we both were very, very frustrated with the situation. 1 year went by, nothing, no response. So finally I started to do some searches, and I searched small presses online, and Black Rose was one of them. So I sent them my manuscript, and immediately I heard back from them. And I think one of the comments was, we want all Black Rose writers to learn from your writing, or something like that. I was
Lovely.
very flattered.
Very lovely.
So, yeah, that's how I
Wonderful.
got it.
Wonderful. Kirsten, different
Yeah.
books, different paths.
Well, I'm actually on the other side of the fence in terms of this discussion, and I act as a literary agent, and I had some authors who had their first novels, even though they were accomplished in other areas. They had really good stories, and one was already an author. But I looked at what Black Rose Writing brings to the table, and it attracted me because of the things that they offer. And one thing was terrific book covers. To me they really stood out in the industry. and I placed a couple authors with them. And then I submitted my own book since I am also an author. So they were very responsive and supportive, and they have been, and very very happy with the publisher so far.
That's wonderful. I love, part of what we try to do here on Launchpad is to celebrate each of your diverse books, but also help others who are looking for a great read, which I think they could all find here. But also, how are the paths different? So this is going to be very interesting perspective. We have comments that are coming in, and one of our Facebook viewers is saying that the mystery series about the art community in LA sounds intriguing. Lee, tell us more about Off
Mhm.
Kilter.
Thank you. Um, yeah, well, I've spent most of my life in Los Angeles as a professor of art, an artist, and a curator. And at the same time, I've always loved murder mysteries set in Los Angeles, written by Raymond Chandler, for example. Um, I'm so old, Raymond Chandler was still alive when I was a kid. And I was always intrigued by the fact that this man who wrote the book I was holding in my hand just lived a few miles away. So, anyway, as I grew up, I kept wondering why no one ever wrote about the art community of Los Angeles, because it is immense and greatly diversified. Finally, I decided, I might as well do this myself. Since you like reading this so much, Lee, why don't you just write a story about what you know? So I did exactly that. And most people who read these books tell me that they really enjoy the expose of understanding how the art community in Los Angeles functions. The truth is, I'm sure that that community doesn't function any differently than the art community in New York or Chicago or Paris or Berlin. All art communities function pretty much the same way. But what's happening in my book is that someone starts killing the top artist in Los Angeles, and the homicide detective has an old friend who was an art student together with him in college. And he decides he needs help with the art community. He doesn't quite understand the quirkiness of what's going on in the art community. So he gets his friend to help him solve these murders.
Well, and you're an artist yourself, so you know that back of the house so well, don't you?
Absolutely. That's the whole point of the movie. The amateur sleuth is an artist, so he can get the homicide detective in the back door, so to speak, and introduce him to all the movers and shakers in the art community.
Kirsten, Lee just mentioned something about write what you know, and I think that each of us is told that as an author. And your book is very different in terms of the
Mhm.
paranormal, etc. So, did you write what you know?
Yes, I did.
So, tell us more about that.
Well, yeah, actually, a lot of people ask me, did I make everything up out of my head? What decisions can you like, did you make to, include so many paranormal and supernatural elements in your book? And actually, if I don't experience it myself, I research it, and I, like, watch a lot of programs that are more of a documentary style of people's real lived experiences. And I like shows that document what's going on. There's a lot of really wild shows that they bring in science, and yes, Michelle, I love paranormal and supernatural too, and they try to actually document this stuff now. It's so wonderful to see that they're taking so much care to document stuff that they should have been like looking into all this time. So it's really nice to see that. And so I wanted to create a book that where people, if they did experience something, they could read it and be like, wow, I actually did experience something like that. And everything is based off of, like, real science, breaking news about space and everything else. And, I put it together with a lot of lived experiences that I had, me and my family actually. And hopefully it'll make a real fun book to read. So,
So a level of credibility that some more skeptical people will will find very helpful, I would think.
yeah, well, the book could be written to skeptics and maybe it'll make them think. One of John Irving's books did that. That he made me think about God. Is there a God in the universe, or are these things that happen only, coincidence? And hopefully, my book will inspire people to think. Is there validity to this? Can I examine this?
Mhm. Well,
So.
I love that you've done the research on that. Saborna, let's go to you. Did you write what you know? Tell us your
Yes, I
perspective.
did. But I just wanted to mention that how intrigued I am by Christine's description of her book, and I just can't wait to grab one, a copy of your book, really. So,
That's wonderful. One of our goals on Launchpad is to add to everybody's to be
yeah.
read pile.
Absolutely. So, in my book, there are two characters, Parul and Mohini. And as I said, Parul is a maid. She comes to this family when she's only 6 years old. And she comes to this family to work as a maid, right? So you can think of this as child labor because Parul works for this family 24/7. She has no time to she goes to a school, but she has no time to do homework. And the mother keeps on telling her, "You're just like my daughter," but she makes a clear distinction between Parul and Mohini. Mohini is her own daughter, and Parul is a maid. So when I was growing up in India, I grew up in a middle class Bengali household, and I saw this kind of treatment with my own eyes. Right. So little girls from villages will come to work in our house. They will be 5, 6 years old. And my mother always said, "Oh, you're just like my daughter. You are my daughter," right? But she always made the very clear distinction between me and them. So these girls, they had separate plates and cups to eat and drink from. They always sat on the floor. They never sat on the household furniture. She would send them to a government school, which was free. And for me, I know I went to a private school, English medium school, and my mother always said, "Oh, don't worry about them. Don't worry about them. They are just going to drop out, and you have to go to college and you have to study." Okay. And also, I remember these girls had separate bathrooms than what the family members used to use. So this, I think, I did not think much about it when I was in India. But when I came to the US and I looked at the society from the outside, this child labor thing bothered me a lot. That my mother had no expectations from this girl, right? She never thought of sending her to a proper school or giving her a proper education or thought of her future. But for me, she had really great plans and great ambition. So I brought that theme into my book.
Astounding. I'm going to echo what Michelle Ann Waite, one of our viewers, is saying. What an experience. Just overwhelming. Fred has unfortunately not going to join us, so I want to give another plug to his book, though. Fred Rutman, The Summer I Died 20 Times. That is a memoir told with a lot of humor, and obviously he has overcome great odds as Saborna's characters have done as well. Lee, let's go back to you. This is not your first novel. Do you want to share about your other work and how that plays into your role as an author?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned, the first two books, Brushed Off and Off Kilter, are the same characters in Los Angeles solving additional crimes with the homicide detective. It turns out that it will be the artist, amateur sleuth, the homicide detective, and a woman who the artist has had an affair with on the side. She's married. She leaves her husband and moves in with the artist. So the three of them, with a dog named Dewey, his real name is Duchamp, but everybody calls him Dewey. So the three people and the dog solve a series of murders in Los Angeles in those two books. The third book is a fictional historical amateur sleuth murder mystery set in 1912 in Cairo, Egypt, and Berlin. It starts with the discovery of the world famous Nefertiti sculpture bust
Hmm.
um, that eventually gets taken to Berlin, primarily because the archaeologist who discovered it is from Berlin, and the Berlin Museum um, he is associated with wanted to display it. And surprisingly, at that time in Egypt, artifacts were controlled by the French. And the French looked at everything that was discovered there and picked and choose what they thought should stay in Egypt, and the rest they said the Germans could have. And so the Nefertiti bust, surprisingly, was in the group that this guy said can go to Berlin. And so the official photographer, a young Egyptian boy from Cairo, um, gets an opportunity to go to Berlin as well and be a photographer for the German Berlin Museum. I'm hesitating because one of the problems with these kind of programs is I could spend my entire hour talking about this book,
It's
and I'm
easy to
trying to
it's well
cut
that's
things out so it moves you along a little bit quicker. Make a long story short, in other words, this young guy is fascinated by the cultural change that he discovers in Berlin and what he had in Cairo. And the girlfriend that he had in Cairo also gets to come to Berlin. She is overwhelmed by the cultural change. Um, and some skullduggery starts off. Some people are stealing and smuggling and copying artifacts from the ancient Egyptians, and a murder occurs. And so the young Egyptian fellow um, becomes an amateur sleuth to help solve that murder. And actually, it's all the women in the story that solve it in the end.
and
Uh,
none of us on this screen would mind that it was the woman who got to do that, I'm sure. But thank
well,
you for that. Kirsten, I want to come back to you for a minute. Your book has a traumatic incident. There is a car accident. And you talked about memory recovery, but you also, one of your characters very much feels like they're losing their mind. Tell us about that path. You're on mute. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Kirsten, you're on mute. If you could unmute for us. Well, there you
Yeah,
go.
Sorry.
yeah, no, no.
That's that's
My
all right.
husband was in the background.
That's okay. Thank you so
All right.
much. So that
So,
losing the mind thing it causes some great dramatic tension, I'm sure.
mhm,
So
right.
so pick up from there.
Well, that's like a lifetime of experience, knowledge, research, that went into the book. A lot of people, poo-poo it these days, but yeah, I really believe that Freud has like a lot of valuable things that are valid to this day. So that a lot of that went into the book, but also combined with New Age. That was an element too that I thought that was important. And again, knowledge, experience, research. I'm a big reader into these things too. So and also, one day I was, just giving my daughter a bath, and all of a sudden, like yeah, I had watched a movie, The Fourth Kind, and then for some reason, like I just got like this sort of like waking daymare dream type of thing, that helped me kind of see the connection between the two. And then out came Inside Dweller. So, but yeah, that in terms of like different problems, like memory loss, I've personally have seen people struggle with it, and it gave me a realistic sense of what's going on. I mean, I do have a degree in mental health counseling. My husband has a PhD in psychology. So, if I didn't know something, I had a resource right in the house who was willing to help. So,
That's fabulous. Saborna, you talk about your book as a heart-wrenching family drama. Um, you've talked about it from the side of privilege, but there's also this incredible side of poverty. What part of your book is that heart-wrenching family drama?
Well, I mean, if you think of Parul, then she comes to this household when she's only 6 years old. And, whatever wages she earns, her father comes every month and collects those wages from her. And his excuses never end. He always makes some excuse every month, like I have asthma, or the house is leaking, or I need an extra blanket. And he would say, give me money, give me money, give me more and more money, right? And Parul was very frustrated with the situation, and she would run to Ma, the mother of the family, and say, Ma, you have to stop my father, because what am I? Am I his bank? Am I going to supply him paper notes for the rest of my life? And he doesn't care for me at all. I mean, all he does is take away my money. And Parul had this dream that one day at least, her father would find her a groom, would find her a husband, and she would have a family of her own. She would have children of her own, and she won't have to do, run these household chores all the time. But then one day, her father comes from the village and says, Parul, I have found a husband for your younger sister. So I am going to arrange a wedding, and you are going to pay for it.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
yeah. So Parul's last wish, that last, uh, escape was also sealed. Like she was completely trapped in this situation, that she would be her father's bank for the rest of her life. And this was her destiny. So this is why she's desperate, and she's looking for a way out. And then that's when she goes down and meets a manager of the printing press, and asks him to help her.
Oh, heart-wrenching indeed. Each of your books is on my TBR now. We just have a very few moments left, so I'd like to hear from each of you. How has writing and the release of your books changed who you are? Lee, let's start with you.
Wow, changed who I am. That's a
Or maybe it hasn't.
yeah, yeah. I'm not sure that it has. Especially the first two books, when they were published, a number of my friends and artists who live in Los Angeles read them and contacted me immediately and said, Lee, this passage you wrote on page 43 sounds very similar to what you and I did back in the
Yes.
day. Uh, I feel those two books, especially, are really about my life in Los Angeles in the art community. Uh, I met with big time collectors, lots of celebrities, art critics, art historians, when I was curating exhibits all over the place. And all of that is in those two books. It's a
So a
whole side
yeah.
of Los Angeles that you just rarely get exposed to unless you become a part of it.
So a platform for you to share your life, but not necessarily changed your life. Kirsten, you've been on both sides, agent, now author. Has your life changed now that you're a published author?
yeah, well, I watched my authors as you know, uh, they went through the process, and they got their covers made and the book design, and it's just it on the other side of the table. It's a completely different feeling. I got to experience that is excitement when I saw Miranda, my main character, on the cover for the first time, and having the book go live was both thrilling and terrifying at the same time. And it's added to the fun. I already have a book, Farming Industrial Hemp, Not Your Daddy's Tobacco. That actually won an award 3 months after its publication. So, I that was for nonfiction. I'm actually a very strong nonfiction writer. So having a fiction book just really, it was like almost like an entirely different experience. So
Indeed, it is. Saborna, last but not least, this is your second novel, but how has becoming an author changed you? We have just a few moments left.
Okay. First of all, I go to all these book clubs and I meet these wonderful people. And when I tell my story, I really feel like there's a soul connection between the readers and the writer, and the way they respond. It's heartwarming. And I feel like my message is getting out, and it is somehow, in some ways, touching people. And that is very important to me. And then I'm of course getting all this media exposure. I went on NPR at one point, and I'm less nervous now, and I'm getting used to this. But the most important thing is that I wrote an entertaining fictional novel which has a message and which talks about injustice, and I wanted people to get that message. And I think it is getting out there, and a lot of people are appreciating the book, reading the book, and understanding the book and getting back to me, and that feels very satisfying.
That is wonderful. I want to thank each of you and the folks who have joined us live on the show. This has been episode 35 with M. Lee Musgrave, Saborna Roychowdhury, Fred Rutman, who was unfortunately not able to join us, and Christian G. Schuder. Thanks so much to each of you, and thanks for coming on Launchpad.
This episode is copyrighted by Grace Sammon and Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Thank you for visiting with us on Launchpad.